All right, it helps to click the Go Live button when you want to actually go live. Woo indeed, Manic Misses. Woo indeed. Good morning, everyone. Hope you're all enjoying your Sunday morning so far. Hope you've all got your breakfast sorted, or at least getting sorted. Got your coffee going or getting going, and are ready to just sort of ease into the last half of the weekend with some chill keyboard talk. And yeah, we're also going to be building up our GMMK2 again. I want to have as many of my boards in-house built as possible because, morning Joe, how's it going? Good to see you, buddy. Yeah, literally just got started, so you haven't missed anything. Perfect timing. Yeah, just sort of going over like why I'm doing a rebuild of this particular board right now. We are going to be rebuilding the GMMK2 on today's stream. This is the 96% version. I want to have at least one of every form factor built up for the channel for some other content that I'm going to be working on. Plus, I want to have a place to actually house some of these keycaps other than just like keeping them in these little storage bins through perpetuity, you know. So, yeah, gonna be rebuilding this, but in the meantime, let's give everyone a few more minutes to sort of trickle in. Want to see if we got a few more stragglers coming along, and we'll just sort of shoot the shit a little bit. How'd the rest of your night go last night, Joe? Because I can tell you right now, mine was sleepless to a fault. I did not get any sleep last night. At least not like solid sleep. I was I was laying there, my eyes were closed, but my right elbow, I guess the night before I slept on it kind of funny, like, and I had it at this weird angle where there was a lot of tension put on it at some point, and it just all day yesterday and all into last night it was in pain. And the pain was noticeable to the point that, like, it's still there. Like, it was noticeable to the point that I can't actually sleep on my right side without keeping my right arm in like a really particular spot right now. So probably for the best we're not doing gaming-centric things today. I want to be able to give my arm a break and just sort of go into the rest of this week in a state of relaxation and focus and getting re-energized for another wave of content to come out. Shogun, good morning. Good morning. Morning. This is 30th. I have yet to change the handle I have on Twitch. Gotcha. No, I know who you are, man. Good to see you. Glad you could join us. Yeah, just waiting for everyone to start rolling in and getting their breakfast sorted and whatever. I guess in your case, lunch. Time zone differences and what have you. But yeah, it looks like we've got the core folks here. So we're gonna go ahead and get started with the keyboard news for today. Now, as you know, I do like to focus at least one of the news articles on one of the local vendors here, so we will have that as well. Also, down in the stream's description, you'll have links for everything we're building with today that's available, as well as all of the stuff that I currently use in my setup, our stream setup, as well as the news articles if you want to follow along and check things out for yourselves. Bear in mind, some of these links are affiliate or referral links. Those do provide a kickback to the channel if you decide to purchase through those. So, let's get started. Let's see. Last night was a little rough. More problems with the pops. Oh, I'm sorry to hear that, Joe. That sucks. That sucks. I'm hoping things smooth out for you soon, man. I really do. But keyboard stuff, and yes, this is Scrabble you're seeing on the screen right now. Clackeys.com just started a group buy on Scrabble Keycaps. And frankly, I'm shocked no one has done this before. And this is legit one of the cutest cap sets I have ever seen. Because DSA Profile, which is what they did this in, is absolutely perfect for a Scrabble type of keycap because it's a flat uniform profile and none of the Scrabble chips vary in size from one another. So thematically and color-wise, this is all really, really nice looking. They also have some accent caps in here that match some of the colored tiles on a traditional Scrabble board. The base kit, starting off at $100 to go in on the group buy, actually not terrible here, especially considering, just especially considering that if this turns out even remotely close to what these renders are looking like, this set's gonna slap. And this was designed by Cassidoo, who is a designer in the keyboard community. I actually have some other keycaps coming in that were designed by Cassidoo and a friend of hers to take a closer look at, and they also happen to be in DSA profile. This a cap set I would use, yes. And what's cool about DSA is it's a spherical, uniform, like unsculpted profile. So being spherical means that the top face of the keycap looks like someone dropped a sphere onto it. Cylindrical, you look at the top of the cap and it's more like an OEM profile or cherry profile keycap, or it looks like someone like just dropped a cylinder down on the top of it to create the scoop for the keycap. I personally find DSA to be one of the most comfortable keycap profiles to type on for general purpose typing. Also, it's nice for having a lower profile keyboard on your desk. This is running until December 15th. Again, the links are in the stream's description if you want to follow along or take a look at this group buy for yourself. And there's also a bunch of other supplementary stuff down here, including the Scrabble Artisans. Artisans for a DSA set, folks. That's lit. I really like that. And I like that they offer it in 3 different colors so you can sort of match it differently based on the intended theme you're going for with your set. They've also got a desk mat that, of course, looks like a Scrabble board. Yeah, just really cool stuff here. Next up, the Zoom TKL Entry Edition group buy is live on Canon Keys, and there's a lot to go over with this. So I'm not going to spend all of the time going over all of these different ads here, but suffice it to say, the Zoom TKL Entry Edition is one of those sub 200 bare bones keyboards that has the ability to get very expensive very quickly, but also gives you the ability to have a more refined point of entry for what you want, because you've got different PCB options, you've got different case color options, different plate materials. There is a cap set that was designed very specifically for this colorway right here for the Zoom TKL, and the kitting itself is fairly expansive for what it is you're getting. You're getting a lot of split spacebar support. You've got some limited 40 stuff going on in here, split backspace. The only thing that it's lacking with the split spacebar config is the second B. That's not present here, but they give you some blank keys for the same row. It's, oh wait, no, second B is right there. Okay, so kitting actually not too shabby. So yeah, Zoom TKL, banger keyboard. Like, I would love to build in one of these, especially with one of the mirror finish bottoms that's glass. Oh my god, the glass belly on this looks so nice. So if this is a board that you're interested in, the group buy is live over at Canon Keys. Not entirely sure how long this is going to be going for off the top of my head. Looks down here, November 29th, so you have about another week or so to make up your mind as to whether or not you want to go in on this. Different plate options include brass, polycarbonate, FR4, aluminum, and carbon fiber. I've personally used aluminum, FR4, polycarbonate, and carbon fiber. Of these 4, if you want bright plasticky, go carbon fiber. If you want more subdued plasticky, go polycarbonate. If you want a balance of all worlds, FR4. If you want something that's a little bit more firm, maybe a little bit tighter with the acoustic profile, maybe a bit brighter, leaning more towards what carbon fiber is doing, but not quite such a plasticky profile, aluminum is what you're going to want to go with. I can't speak to brass plates because I've not used one yet, but I am getting ready to use a copper plate, so eventually I'll be able to comment on that. Also of note, this does utilize a flex cut PCB, so bear that in mind when you build with this board. Also, this board goes in the exact opposite direction. This is so big brain, it's not even funny. This is the Brane Minus, and this group buy is going until December 15th. Comes in at about $250 to start. Now, if you're wondering where the rest of the keyboard went, same. I am also wondering where the rest of the keyboard went here, but this is actually the entire keyboard. And to put this in perspective, that spacebar is a 6.25U spacebar, I believe. Either 6 or 6.25U. Either way, it's adjacent to what you're probably using at your keyboard at home right now. That is a very tiny keyboard, and this is what's referred to as a QAZ layout, where you notice over here on the left, where the Q, A, and Z keys would be, we instead have Escape, Tab, and Shift. That's because when you're typing with a board like this, you're using function layers a lot. And usually by default, a QAZ keyboard has these keys, the Escape, Tab, and Shift on the left, default to the alpha key, with the function layer opening up Escape, Tab, or Shift as is needed. Same thing with the right side over here. Return, right shift, and backspace are all accessible from the function layer, whereas normally that's P, one of your other punctuation marks, and another punctuation mark down here. So yes, really big brain. Good morning, PC Jack. Good to see you, buddy. We are just going over this really bizarre tiny keyboard called the Brane Minus. This is over at cbkbd.com. Again, the links for this and everything else we're talking about for the news updates is down in the stream's description. Hope your Sunday morning's treating you well so far, buddy. But yes, this keyboard requires the most galaxy of brains to be able to type on. And while it's not for me necessarily, I still like to share these group buys because these are really fun projects to work on, and eventually I do actually want to get a board like this in-house, if for no other reason than I want to have a keyboard for ants, exactly. But I want to have this perspective, right? I want to have at least an exposure to the typing experience and try and understand where something like this makes sense and who, what, where, just wrap my head around it, even if the conclusion is still this is definitely not for me. Next update is our local business highlight. Stupid Bullets Tech is about to get in the Gazoo U4TX. Now, if that sort of sounds familiar to you, you may have seen a YouTube short we uploaded a little while ago where I accidentally got 2 of the early prototype versions of this switch. I really enjoyed it then. I imagine it's going to be absolutely fantastic now. Now, you're noticing it's currently reading sold out here. And again, you can follow along in the stream's description. This is what's referred to as a semi-silent tactile switch, which means, in this case, you get sound on bottom out because it has an elongated stem pole and it's got that sort of like deep, quote, thocky, unquote, for lack of a better term. It's a very deep, muted, bass-driven sound that the switch produces on bottom out. But on top out, you've got silicone material in the slide rail that basically just makes it a dull thud. You barely hear anything at all. It's an interesting typing experience. It's one I personally actually like very much. And having used the sample switches and brought these to a local keyboard meetup for other people to try, this switch is a confirmed banger. Most everyone that used this liked it. Hell, even the missus liked this switch, and this is significantly heavier than she's used to using. So definitely keep your eyes out for Stupid Bullets Tech in-stock update for the Gazoo U4TX switches. Over here on the right-hand side, pink tab says notify me. Click that and go ahead and sign up for the email listing to be notified when this goes live. Next up is the update on modes themes. We've been talking about this here and there throughout the news feed, but these themes are essentially the total package aesthetically when it comes to theming your setup. And it's all inspired by sort of sort of easy to work with colorways that are going to work largely in whatever environment you're currently in or whatever mood you're in. They're very safe approaches, but they're very stylish. And in this case, it actually does include wall art as part of this package. And there's a lot that they're including with these themes. Keycaps, desk mats, switches, artisans. We just mentioned wall art, and we've got digital art. The digital art has been up for a minute, and in fact, that's what I use for my background right now. It's one of the Obscura backgrounds. It's absolutely one of my favorite desktop wallpapers I've come across yet. So I'm really excited to see the rest of this lineup come to fruition. But as far as the switches go, we have a tactile, we have a linear, and then we have a silent tactile. So all of these are part of a full-blown switch lineup revamp they're doing. So their current line of reflex switches are not going to be, as far as I know, available. If they are, they will be their own separate thing. But this is the new evolution of their switches. Mode on their social media pages has been releasing sound tests that they've done in-house of all three of these switches. So if you want to take a listen to those, be sure to follow them on Instagram, because that's where you'll want to take a listen to what these sound like, again, with a grain of salt, understanding that every typing test is going to sound different. Now, the quantities available are per switch. That's going to be important to note. This is a very limited edition first run of these switches. And part of that, I think, is because I could speculate all I want, but nonetheless, the initial launch is going to be very limited on those. Artisan keycaps for your keyboard to go with the switches and the keycaps and the wall art. It's all very aesthetic, and I love these artisans. They're all aluminum with color-matched enamel infill, which means these are going to have, in the infill section, a different look and texture than the rest of the keycap does, but these are really, really sick artisans, and it looks like they're going to be relatively flexible in terms of like what kind of cap set you can use them with. Like if you don't go with their own in-house caps, you could still use this on a variety of sets, and it would look really nice. Desk pads for Tomorrow, Obscura, and Anthracite look so good. I love the Tomorrow and Obscura desk mat. I also really like Anthracite, but I also know this would be just immediately dirty on my desk. As it is, my white desk mats don't see a whole lot of play here because the ones that I do have aren't available anymore, and if something happens to them, I would cry myself to sleep. Not because of wasted money, it wasn't super expensive, but because they're some of my favorite desk mats. So that in mind, they have darker colors that are going to work for more folks. The posters actually look kind of sick. I kind of want to get all of these for the walls in here, just because I like the vibe on all of these, and I like that I don't know, there's just something about the design that, like, I vibe with it, you know? It's a whole mood. Now, the cap sets. The cap sets are definitely worth talking about. So we can see that for Obscura, which is the vibe I've been leaning into, it's your generic white on black cap set. But you always want to have a white on black cap set in your arsenal. It's always a safe bet. It goes on everything. It's timeless. It's clean. Love it. We've also got a white and gray set that they're leaning into with Anthracite. And for Tomorrow, they're going with a sort of like dull RGB Dulce kind of look. It's classic, but it's kind of fun too. I like the approach they did with the pastels in the mods, rather than going with something deeper or something more saturated. This allows them to have some fun with this colorway and lean into that sort of pale pastel spectrum thing that the Tomorrow artwork seems to invoke, without it being a garish cap set that's going to be hard to match on your board. So I really like what they did with that set. Also, the kitting here is about as perfect as you could possibly get for an initial cap launch. Not only do we have extensive support for split backspace things, the second B, we've got 40 support, split backspace, 3 different space bars ranging from 6U to 7U. We also have media keys to mount above a numpad. That is a really interesting add in a cap set like this. They also have media keys for side-mounted macro clusters. So for something like the EVGA that we're going to be working on, where I've got the 4 clusters off to the left, I could use these caps for that, and they would actually match the functions that they're using. Imagine. Good morning, Tanmay. How you doing? Good to see you, buddy. Just finishing fiending and drooling over these mode keycaps and theme stuff that they're going to be releasing soon. But yeah, down here, base kit support for anything from a full 104 to 108 keyboard, all the way down to 40s and everything in between. Basically, you would have to be using a super bizarre keyboard for this cap set as an all-in-one kit to not work. But shipping in April 2023. So you're going to be waiting a little while to get the entirety of your theme, but these launch on Black Friday. So if you want to check these out, again, the links for this and everything else we're discussing is down below. Vortex is a brand I've seen very frequently on mechanicalkeyboards.com, and there's a lot of Vortex keyboards that I've wanted to take a look at. None more than this one, however. This is the Vortex Model M SSK. I love this genuinely old school looking keyboard. It's so good. So good. If you were ever looking for something to put SA or MT3 on, this is the board you do it with right here. It would look like it grew there on its own. And there's a lot of options for this particular board. But we won't go over it here on the mechanicalkeyboards.com website. Instead, we're going to go over to the Vortex page proper to take a look at the options. However, there is a link for this in the stream's description that does automatically set up the creator code for us, the Manic Geek, in checkout for you. So if this ends up looking like something that you might be interested in pre-ordering, yeah, it'll help support the channel and is much appreciated. So, Vortex Model M SSK. There's a couple of configurations you can get with this. It comes in black, silver, blue, which is looking like a snack, and space gray, which is, oh lord, I love the space gray. It's not significantly different from the black, but it's different enough that, like, it's got enough more blue added into it that it's a little bit more interesting to look at and and sort of work with. So we also have 6.25U or Win key layout, and then we have a 7U Win key layout, and then we have a 7U Win keyless layout. Now, if it doesn't seem like anything really changed significantly, the main thing that changes between any of these boards is when you move to Win keyless, where you get these blockers on the left and right hand side. That's largely an aesthetic choice. I personally really dig the blockers on a TKL aesthetically, but in terms of function, it's really hard for me to be okay with blocking off points where there could otherwise be a perfectly good functioning switch, and I have caps for it. So, that is entirely a you thing as to whether or not you pick that. You also get ANSI and ISO layout compatibility. So if you live in a market other than the United States or somewhere that uses an ISO layout, you're not going to be locked in to using ANSI and learning a layout that maybe you're less comfortable with. Also, you get to use those sick ISO keycaps that they're putting in a lot of the in-stock and GMK cap sets and Milky Way and what have you these days. Man, ISO enters are looking so good. The meta key is useful. Yeah, exactly. Not only that, but like it can be argued that TKLs are not as efficient as they could be for their size, so why would you want to remove more of those possible points of function, you know? So we have aluminum plate or brass plate options. We also have a solderable PCB. as well as the hot swap PCB. So the estimated delivery date looks to be around March of next year, so that's actually not terrible. The pre-order is going until December 25th, so you've still got some time to mull it over with this one. This is a wired keyboard, so you're not going to get wireless functionality. However, it is QMK, VIA, and VIAL supported. This means you don't have to have any bulky proprietary software installed on your computer in order to tell any of these switches what you want them to do. You get a lot of control. If you prefer to have a web-based interface to not have to install anything at all, VIA is a really nice option, assuming the board registers with the VIA website. I've been seeing some isolated reports of certain keyboards not communicating nicely with the web interface. Hopefully this board works out well there. This does have 5-pin sockets, so any switch is going to end up working here, though I do recommend building with 5 pins in this board. This also utilizes a gasket mount structure, and there are a lot of foam options as well. On top of that, standard 1.6mm PCB. I love to see that. Much as we like the thin PCB and the Tiger Light, I feel like that board is more the exception than the rule, and I feel like the more I get in 1.2mm flex cut PCBs, the more that's going to prove to be true. Of course, USB-C connectivity. We've got this Vortex aluminum badge up in the top left that, of course, looks like the IBM badge from back in the day. 6-degree typing angle, very comfy typing angle on this keyboard. I usually prefer to keep things below 7 degrees if I can at all help it. This is going to be really comfy, but it's still going to have that old school slanted look. Not included, of course, cable, switches, caps, switch puller, cap puller. Interestingly, no PCB mount stabilizers included either. So you're going to need to get everything else with this board. It slightly changes the value proposition, but let's face it, you've got your own preferred stabilizers you'd want to use anyway, like myself. I prefer to use TX stabilizers on my boards as and where I can. However, there are a few other brands that if I can't get TX, that I will gravitate towards. So they're really leaning into the it's your board, let that be your thing to sort out. It means it's one less thing they can get wrong and they can just focus on the board itself. There is RGB backlighting on this. Not sure how much that's going to matter for the people that this particular board vibes with. But again, we've got a lot of different foam options here. We've got first, everything is pour-on where it can be. The gaskets are pour-on. The plate foam is pour-on. They're claiming the switch pad is pour-on as well, but that's basically going to make the board sound like every other board out there. We also have pour-on case foam, and the case is entirely aluminum. So, that being said, for $200, this ain't a bad keyboard at first glance, and I would really love to build one on a live stream. If I can get the money going before this group buy ends, I may see about going in on one. We'll see. Now, as far as other great sales going on right now, Canon Keys is on a buy one, get one free sale for all of their Canon caps and nice PBT keycap sets. You buy one, you get the other one faux free. So if there were a couple of these cap sets that you were contemplating going in on, but you weren't sure which one you really wanted to buy, and you've been kind of mulling it over because money's a little tight these days, you want to make sure you're getting your most out of your buck. Now the choice became a lot easier because in buying one, you're getting what is most likely the least expensive of the two. That's usually how these promos work. Faux free. And, in case we didn't catch it, they've got some awesome colorways and themes for these keycaps. Nice PBT Soya Milk is one of the newer ones that they just released. I really love the pale blue and sort of like warm, creamy colors for the modifiers here. We took a look at Vasilia a little while ago when that one first came out. beige Cyrillic, beige Korean, beige Japanese sub-legends. Really just sweater weather is one of the coziest cap sets that I've ever seen. Gray Burgundy has this really unique sort of visual appeal to it. Yeah, banger cap sets here. So buy one, get one free. That ends tonight at midnight. So if you want to get in on this before the end of the day, check out the link in the stream description. Less on the value side of things, but worth pointing out because I really love this colorway. GMK Civilizations. This group buy has been fulfilled to the early adopters that got in on more sane pricing, if such a thing can be said, of GMK keycaps. And the extras are now live at Mex&Co. This base kit at $175 is obviously not as big a value proposition as some of the other cap sets we've been taking a look at here. You notice there's no split backspace stuff going on. Your 40s and split backspace support is a little bit more restrictive with this cap set for the price. That said, there was auxiliary kitting that you could use to expand that, but it looks like the 40s and ortho stuff was one of the first kits to sell out. And even the split spacebar stuff is sold out. So it's possible that those two kits just didn't have as many extras as the others did. So you still have the brass mods that you can get, which changes up the color palette of the modifiers a little bit and makes things a bit more uniform. And you also get access to the novelty caps. Now, with the novelty caps and the base kit, you can still technically do Alice Arisu stuff, but you'll have to use some of your spare shift keys and will therefore have a sort of weird profile for your space bars. You also have to use one of the other R4 1U keycaps you have to sub in for the second B, but it can be done. Now, there's also some really cool artisans available with this cap set that all lean into like the ancient civilization theme, and they're actually not all in cherry profile, which I find kind of interesting. There's like 7 different caps here. Some of them are sold out, like the Rama white cap is sold out. But we still have the brass cap, we have the brass 2.25U, both of the dome caps sold out. I would have imagined those would be fairly limited run. These aren't easy to make, especially without any bubbles in them at all. And then the SA caps are also gone. So a couple of Rama artisans left, base kit, novelties, brass mods left. Again, in stock at Mex&Co. GMK cap sets are expensive, folks, and sometimes they're hard to find. But when they're in stock and you've got it to spend, worth looking into. Also got some desk mats in stock for it, and those are kind of aesthetic. I like that. So, last thing on the agenda for the news today, and then we'll get into our keyboard build. Varmillo. This is a brand I have not personally worked with, but have often admired. And while I do have a desk mat in from these folks, I unfortunately don't really use it because it's got a permanent thermal paste stain on it. And I just can't bear to throw it away, so I may frame it at some point just for the lulz. But Varmillo is known for making keyboards that veer a very different direction in terms of quality and feature set that's offered. And nowhere is that more apparent than with the Chang'e VPE 108 and the TKL variant of this board. Now, if you notice, this has a very specific look and theme. If you're buying this keyboard, you are buying it because you want this total package that's being presented to you. What's nice about this particular design versus other previous Varmillo keyboards is this one offers hot swap. So you can actually put in whatever switch you want without needing to desolder the board. And on top of that, you've also got the ability to, let me switch up that view so you can see a little bit more. You also have the ability to more easily tune the stabilizers here. Now, this being a Varmillo board, I would actually be willing to wager that if these are plate mount stabilizers, I would be shocked if they are cherry style stabilizers. I'm more willing to believe this board is using CoStar stabilizers, which are An older form of stabilizer, but nonetheless one that is valid and one that Iqnix has proven in recent history that you can get to sound really good. So I'm not worried about that either way. But close-up shots of this board reveal it to be exactly as pretty as it looks from a distance. This is a gorgeous keyboard, and yeah, it does have some LED backlighting. I believe it's just white. I don't know yet if there is a matched desk mat for this, but if it is available, it would be on mechanicalkeyboards.com. If not now, then eventually. Now, as far as switch options, you get a basic gamut of Cherry MX and Kale Prestige switch options. Each of those will alter the price slightly. I personally do not recommend going in on the Cherry switch options unless you just really like a specific feel of the Cherry MX switch that other switches lack. And even then, if you go Cherry MX, I would still recommend doing a spring swap. Stock Cherry springs are not really the greatest. But if this is a keyboard that vibes with you, or you're more interested in something like the TKL version of the board, just to save a little bit more space on your desk, still has the same overall design, still has the same switch options available to it. The link is down in the stream's description. And once again, buy through that link, you're helping support the channel's efforts. So thank you so much once again. That will wrap it up for keyboard news for this week. So let's go ahead and get into our build finally. Start building, damn it. So again, we are working with the GMMK2 96% variant keyboard today. We are using Drop's Phantom plate mount stabilizers, and those are also linked down below. These are some of my favorite plate mount stabilizers I've encountered. Actually, they're probably my favorite. They have the cleanest fitment in most plates that I have exposed them to. They tune really easily. The stems are very easy to work with. The wires were great with these. And for the price, they're actually giving you more than enough stabilizers to do even a proper full-size keyboard. I've got one more of these the 2Us left that I could do another, like a proper 104, 108 key keyboard with these stabs. And they're clear, which makes them sort of just universally applicable to whatever build. It'll go with anything. 5-pin hot swap sockets, they are unfortunately north-facing, so no Cherry profile stuff here because the switches we're using today do not carry a long pole stem. These are, we'll go ahead and pull up this window actually. These are Keebmonkey Iceberg Linears. Get that going. Got this really pretty vibrant teal blue color on the outside. It actually matches the patina on the EVGA keyboard that we're building. This is a linear switch with a 2-stage elongated 55-gram spring. It was not factory lubed. We did lube these with 205 grade 0, and we'll go ahead and hold this up to the lav with one of the keycaps we're going to be using today, just so you can take a quick listen to what the switch sounds like on its own. So it's a much deeper sounding switch, and the 205 grade 0 that we lube these with just makes it a little bit deeper. Kind of a weird switch. I've not had a lot of great success, admittedly, with other personal builds with it, but I'm hopeful that the GMMK2 will be a good fit for these. Also, they're only like 20 cents a switch, and if you go through the link in the description, it just brings you to the Keebmonkey page. It's not even an affiliate link. It's a 20-cent linear, and when you get them lubed with a bit of 205, they're very smooth. The springs are maybe a little bit suspect here. And maybe some of the design, the build tolerances on the stem itself are a little suspect. I noticed there were some anomalies with the bottom of the stem in some of these being ever so slightly crooked at the bottom perch, but it doesn't seem to affect functionality. We'll see how this all comes together. For the keycaps, we are going to be using Tai Hao's white on black keycaps, but we're going to be using some of the some accent caps from a black on white set to sort of give this build a little bit more pop. Now, I have a link in the stream for the what do you call it? Just a general selection of cubic profile keycaps, so you can see what they have going on. Unfortunately, this specific set we're using is not currently in stock. The kit that I got is significantly more expansive than the one that's currently available on mechanicalkeyboards.com. But since we're on the topic of those caps, I want to touch on something because I got sent a set of replacement keycaps. One of my space bars went kind of wonky on me. And I noticed that in some of the duplicate caps they sent me, there was a texture problem with them, or a finish problem, I guess. So we'll use the ISO enter as our example here. If we take a look at this ISO enter, when I move that around and the light focuses on it, you can see it's got a reflective surface, but it's an even reflective surface. It just looks like matte plastic should look, and it looks clean and mostly even. Even on the back near the sprue mark, you can see there's some scuffing from the manufacturing process, but it's not super pronounced. And honestly, for a $45 cap set that's this extensive, I would imagine Tai Hao is cutting corners somewhere. Now take a look at this duplicate cap. You can already tell it looks different. You can already tell that surface is not the same as the other one. And I'll hold them up side by side so you can see what I'm talking about. Yeah, right there. See how this one has more sheen to it than this one? Yeah. Something went wrong with one or the other of these. And it's hard for me to say which is which because on the one hand, this shinier texture is very similar to what I see being done on DCX profile keycaps from Drop. However, the matte finish on the initial set that I got reminds me a hell of a lot more of GMK style ABS plastic. Just, you know, not quite as robust an infill as GMK would do. And slightly thinner plastic, really not by a ton though. And it's, I'm not sure which is which, but I think if I had to pick one, I would prefer the matte finish to the shiny finish caps. They don't look right with the shine on them. Now we're going to open up this board real quick because I want to take a look at the tolerances underneath the PCB again, where the case foam is, because if there's enough room, then I may see about doing a medical tape mod on the back of the PCB, and maybe pulling the case foam and seeing where that gets us. Because in the past, when I do that, and then I replace the case foam with something like polyfill, I tend to get pretty good results, but I've never done that in a board with an integrated plate like this one. So that should be an interesting mod to explore. Now, the other thing we're going to do with this board is when I set up for our amazingly janky typing test, I'm going to show you a trick with GMMK2 that will get the board sounding better for free, and all it requires is a few seconds of your time and a little bit of patience. Because there are definitely opportunities to be had with this and most boards, if we're being honest, until we start getting into the high end. Then once you get into the high end, what I'm starting to notice as I build more boards is it's the design of the board that ends up being the problem, not build quality. because there's been boards that folks like Andy Nguyen and Alex Odos and Apiary and all those folks have built that they'll rave about the build quality of the board, but then the typing experience is poop dookie. or something else is not quite right about the board, and it's not necessarily the fault of the switches or the caps or the stabilizers, or it's the board proper that's the problem. And typically you can work around that with different part selection, but how annoying is that when you buy a keyboard and you expect to want to use certain hardware with that board, only to find out that it feels or sounds like shit. Like, perfect example, when we did that Mode 80 build and I sent that back to the client, he completely removed the switches and the caps we were using on the board originally. What's in that board now is Novel Keys Cream Dream switches and GMK Mandalorian. Ooh, that board looks so good with GMK Mando on it. And having built with cream switches myself, I bet it sounds and feels amazing too, especially with the stack mount carbon fiber plate. Ooh, ooh. Yeah, that was a sick board. It was an expensive board, and it was a board where the opportunities to improve upon it basically boiled down to building it correctly. It's wild. It's wild how that works out, but you know, sometimes folks are just in a hurry with life in general, and they need to get things done sooner rather than later. And that even unfortunately ends up being true for their hobbies. And, oh, I missed a screw. And sometimes they just need that sort of second set of eyes on a thing to fix a problem. Now, in this case, this was a very expensive proposition in general because there was shipping paid between the East and West Coast of the United States. There was also downtime where the board wasn't being used. But if we're talking about a higher end board like that, and there's no one local you trust to go over your very expensive product, both parties just sort of learn to account for that in dealing with one another and make it the best experience possible, you know? Okay, so we are once again not needing to separate the PCB and the plate from one another. This is, again, if you've never seen an integrated plate design board taken apart, the top case is the plate. So there is, and because the plate foam is already installed and we're not doing like PE foam sheets on the hot swap sockets or anything this time, there's no need. And in general, I don't feel like there's a need to do that with this particular board. Again, unless you're doing PE foam stuff. That might be worth it for some folks, but we are going to go about things a little bit differently here. We are going to use 3M medical tape. Let me just come over here and grab some. All right. Bam. 3M medical tape. So, why am I using 3M medical tape? You may ask. That's a good question. I don't honestly know. Most of it boils down to I have just, I've gotten used to using certain modding materials for this, and while 3M medical tape is not traditionally what you use for a tape mod, normally you use masking tape, I find that in certain scenarios, the 3M tape has a better overall impact on the sound of the board because, like masking tape, this has a high tack to it. But unlike masking tape, this has an extreme flexibility to it because it's made of a looser weave fabric material than the masking tape is. This is micropore 3M medical tape. It's not the thick stuff. This is the kind of stuff you use to like fix gauze to a wound, just to get it to stop bleeding long enough to put proper dressing on it. Or if you've got to hold a compress down, this is the kind of tape you would use for that. And you can get 2 packs of this stuff for a song on Amazon. Probably should have linked it down below, but that is on me. I find that because this fabric has a sort of a fuzzy surface texture to it, I find that it's better at helping me tune case acoustics a little bit more without completely dulling out the sound of the switch. This isn't as bright as masking tape by any stretch of the imagination, but because it's got this fuzzy surface area, it also helps us with case acoustics just a little bit more, especially in this case where if we look at the plate foam here, we can see there are regions where there's hardly any pressure being applied to the plate foam, and others where the PCB is already sort of indenting inward. We've also got this gap here in the center, which is meant to act as a channel for the JST cable. But yeah, I feel like 3M medical tape could potentially be a good move here. I've had success with it in the past, at least. So we're going to go ahead and try that out here and see what effect this has on the board. And the other reason I like this stuff, again, it grips the PCB so well, but it remains easy to remove. That's sort of critical with any mod that I do with a keyboard. It needs to be something that can be easily removed in the event I decide I don't like it, or I decide I want to try something different. It shouldn't be something that is just permanently irrevocable. It's a little bit different with something like clipping the feet on a stabilizer. That is a quality of life thing for most modern keyboard enthusiasts. And the fact that there are stabilizer manufacturers still producing stabilizers with the legs on them is a little strange, but that's also sort of a personal bias talking. A popular personal bias, but a personal bias nonetheless. Maybe, I don't know, maybe comment if you're someone that prefers to have the legs still on your stabilizer stems, all else being equal, right? Like you're still lubing your stabilizers, but you prefer the legs to be on rather than off. Because for me, I just find it more annoying to tune the stabilizers with those legs on, because the noise they make, for me anyway, is distracting from trying to listen for what's actually going on with the stabilizer. And that's also a me thing, right? Like that's my anxiety working me up. I know that, but yeah, the legs just get in the way for me. You can technically get away with not clipping the legs if you lay down a little bit of this 3M medical tape underneath your stabilizer stems. This shouldn't create enough of a tension on your stabilizer housings that it'll interfere with things there, but because this is fabric, it's got a softer give to it, even though it is relatively thin, and it should dampen out most of the sound of the legs on the bottom of your stabilizer stem while still allowing you to keep the sort of like assisted debounce that they provide to your stabilized keycap. You can also do that with clips of Band-Aid if you want to, though Band-Aids are thicker than 3M medical tape, so you may find yourself with a slightly different feel in overall travel if you use Band-Aids. At least that's been my experience. But again, I'm hyper aware of little quality things like that. So I just sort of notice it more than maybe, I don't know, maybe a typical user might. But the one thing we need to do with this tape mod is make sure we don't tape over this connection point for the JST connector. So once I lay this down and get it lined up, I need to do some trimming before I commit and go full send. Clip that right there. This doesn't have to be neat, it just has to work. There we go. Now I've got plenty of visibility to plug in our cable when the time comes. So, what kind of coffee we drinking this morning, folks? I unfortunately had to resort to a lower cost coffee than what we normally get, but it's at least still a decent tasting coffee. We've actually started doing this thing where there's a breakfast spot by us called Brudder Soder, and it's in the Norwegian Cultural Center that's just up the road from us. You would never know it was there unless you knew it was there. Like, it's an if you know, you know kind of place. They have the most phenomenal breakfasts I've had in a very long time. They also have outrageously good cold brewed coffee. Not only is it cold brew, it is cold brew with lavender in it and oat milk, and it is just stupidly delicious. It's aromatic, it's flavorful, it's comfy, but it's cold, so you don't have to wait for it to cool off to the point that it's not demolishing your face hole to drink it. It's really nice. And we've started adding lavender to our coffee at home when we brew it in the French press. I just take a pinch of lavender leaves, dried lavender leaves, and I just agitate it as I'm sprinkling it into the grounds. And I do that per cup. So if I'm making 2 cups, it's 2 pinches and so on. And that's been working out really well. It makes an absolutely delicious cup of coffee. Not with every roast, though. I'm finding there are some roasts it doesn't work quite as well with. This one we've got right now, it's fine, but I prefer the coffee we normally get. We are just allocating funds right now towards holiday things. I'm gonna go ahead and call that done. We're gonna stick to one layer of this. Now this is a little different from what I normally do. If you're just joining us, welcome, by the way, and happy Sunday morning. Hope the weekend is treating you well so far. We have just done a tape mod, but with 3M medical tape instead of masking tape. And reason for this is I kind of like the sort of fuzzy surface texture of the 3M medical tape and the fact that it has the same kind of tack as masking tape, but tends to grip the PCB a little bit better. I am currently drinking lukewarm coffee. Beyond that, I'm not sure. Yeah, mine's definitely gotten to that point now as well. So you're in good company. Now, you'll notice that because we taped over the board, we no longer have proper access to the openings for the standoffs. So the next thing we have to do is go through and poke through the tape in all of the spots where that needs to happen. And we find where we need to poke through and just do that. Just remove some of the tape in that area just to make sure we've got clean line of travel for the standoffs, because especially with this keyboard, the standoffs are integrated into the plastic case. Apologies for the garbage vehicle that is currently making all of the noise outside. I appreciate them coming and hauling off the neighborhood's refuse. All right. Yeah, the standoffs are unfortunately a little bit fragile on this board, so I would rather do this and reduce strain on them than not and try and force it. Had a coffee, now I'm on a brunch mimosa. Ooh, mimosas. That sounds great. That actually sounds great. Like, not all the time. I don't always vibe with mimosas, but when I do, there is like no other adult beverage that will work in that moment, and I just want like a picture of it. I don't know what the rest of y'all are drinking, but I just want a picture of it for myself. Good times. Good times. Actually, we're since we're heading into the Thanksgiving season, we got all of our beer pairings together for our Hobbit Day that we do, because we do Thanksgiving a little bit different in our house. We have what we refer to as Hobbit Day, where we eat like a hobbit for the day, and we have first breakfast, second breakfast, 11sies, luncheon, afternoon tea, dinner, and supper. This year, however, we're doing a more focused theme with it, and we're going with pie and beer pairings. We're also not doing 7 frickin' beer pairings, because that's a lot of beer, and it's just the 2 of us, and we're not looking to get so trash that we can't wake up early enough for Black Friday stuff. So we're toning it down a bit, but we're doing the pairings specifically with pies and with Freemsters Union beers, one of which is a Freemsters Union exclusive beer. Their in-house Creek sour cherry ale that they made with their very own cherry tree. It's a wonderful beer, and I'm really excited to be doing pairings with it and the rest of the Freemsters Union offerings, and everything is barrel aged from that. Blueberry puree, vodka infused, splash added. A lot of pies as well. Yeah. All of that. That just sounds wonderful. All of it. I need it in me now. Right now. Okay, so I believe I got all of... Yeah, I think I got all the standoffs worked through. Now, you want to remember these little plastic inserts right here. See these? These are the diffuser bars for the LED lighting on the side of the keyboard. You want to make sure those are still in place when you reassemble this thing, because if they're not, you're going to have a bad time. It's not that the RGB light won't work, it just won't be worth working. Because it won't be diffused correctly, so it really won't be as visible as you would prefer it to be. It's still not super visible on this keyboard. To be clear, it's still not super visible, but it will be much less so if you don't include those bars. All right. Yeah, that's correct. Get this JST plugged in. JST is the way to be. Maybe not with this tape over it, but I would rather the tape be there than not, because there's just bare metal underneath it. Just trying to get it reinserted without disturbing the tape. Doesn't seem to want to cooperate, so I'm going to need to peel it back a little bit more than I got right now. If you do this gently enough, you should be able to lift it up enough to get the connector inserted, and then just set the tape back in place when you're done. That's again another reason I like this tape. It's very forgiving if you need to do stuff like this, because it's made of just a more flexible fabric material thing. Should be going in right. What the hell? Sometimes these connectors bother me. I'm trying to do this right. Why won't you work with me? Why won't you let me love you? It's
it's like exactly off enough for me to not be able to plug it in. You know what? Screw this, I'm peeling it back more. There we go. Now it's plugged in. Now set the tape back down over it to keep everything protected, as was the original design intent. And then we can set this back in place. All right, we are keyboarding, keyboarders. You still have to push the plate down a little bit to get the standoffs to go through the tape. Yeah, I think we're looking good. Or not. What is all of this now? What is all of this? Let's see what's going on. I'm getting a little resistance from the plate and PCB assembly now. So I want to make sure this is something that we can work with. Maybe I just need to... Where did I just put my tweezers? They're probably somewhere, yep, right there. Let's see if we can... move this stuff down and out of the way a little bit. 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay. We should be good to go. Why aren't we? 2, 3. Okay. Okay, looks like there were a few other holes that need to be punched that I didn't account for, and that was that resistance we were getting. So, important lesson to take away from this. Do not ever put excessive force on your keyboard parts when you're trying to reassemble everything. Make sure you're giving it enough room to sort of flex about a bit before you go full send and just smash everything together. Because there is the possibility that even though this tape is not necessarily applying a lot of extra force on the board, it's creating enough tension across the back of the PCB now that if you're trying to smash all this together and there's bits of the case down here that aren't wanting to go through, you could actually warp this assembly, and that will very much negatively impact your overall experience with the board. And we don't want that. Like, not even a little bit do we want that. Still getting some fighting. Where am I getting it from? Still getting some fighting. I did not realize this board was going to be as interesting to do this mod on as it ended up being. So we end up having, okay, I've got standoffs there, there, and there. We've got this cluster with through holes to work with. That's got a through hole to work with. This diffusion bar needs to come down here. Also, everyone that's just joining in on the stream, welcome, welcome. We are just figuring out our tape mod that we did on our GMMK Pro here, or GMMK Pro, GMMK2. The Pro is what's in front of me. I'm getting a little resistance when I try to seat the plate and PCB assembly back down. I'm just making sure that we're not going to damage anything when we reassemble the board, because I would like this to continue working, because it's not a bad board. It's a good board. Not the best board, but it's a good board. There we go. Okay. perfect. Everything is seating just like it should. Something was just a little out of place. It happens, no worries. Okay, so now we can get this back together. Now I'm hoping that we shouldn't need to do much fine-tuning of these stabilizers. They should still be tuned from the last time we had this board built. And because we did not still disassemble the plate and PCB assembly, all of the sockets are still aligned. So I'm not worried about the switches lining up correctly in the socket. However, if you do ever take apart the plate and PCB assembly for a GMMK2, make sure you insert some switches in the corners here when you go to line everything back up and reattach the assembly to make sure that everything is as it should. Otherwise, you may have the board off by exactly enough that when you try to plug in a switch, it's not gonna be quite right, and that will be why. You may also encounter a bunch of bent pins if you do that. Potentially damaged hot swap sockets if you're trying to force it too much. So definitely want to be careful, but you don't want to be overly delicate, right? There are some things that do require a little bit of tactful force, but not everything, and certainly not with mechanical keyboards. I mean, these parts are only so durable. You don't want to... this is not a car you're working on, okay? Yes, there are metal parts in it, and those metal parts are, in general, reasonably durable, but I've warped plates like these before. I've got a keyboard in there, a Skyloon keyboard that we did work with on the channel a while back, that I need to get a replacement plate for because I've permanently warped it trying to do some foolish shit to the case that I shouldn't have been doing because I forced it. And that was a steel plate. And thicker than this one. So the likelihood of permanently warping something if you're trying to force it is actually kind of high. Higher than maybe you would initially think would be the case. Case. See what I did there? So we're not fully tightening these fasteners down. We're just getting them to bottom out, and then I'm going to go around and give them a few more turns. And this time we are using all of the fasteners, but later on, once we get this board fully built, I'm going to show you a trick with a couple of these fasteners to improve the quality of your GMMK2. It costs you nothing but a few seconds of your time for the actual mod and a little bit of extrapolated thought. And we'll go over why this mod works when we do it in more detail. But it was it's actually based on feedback I've been seeing on a lot of different keyboard designs of varying mounting styles. And it doesn't matter what the mounting style is, if it's gasket mount, top mount, whatever. If you have some form of anchor point, like a hard anchor point around the space bar, things tend to get a little weird. The space bar may sound a bit thin, it may sound a bit uneven, and you might think, well, hell, what did I do wrong? Why does the space bar sound like poop dookie? It's not anything you did. It's the design of the case that's the problem. And if you notice on GMMK2 here, the case shares a similar design flaw. And we'll take a listen to that when we do a typing test on this. And then go over how you would go about fixing it. Now remember, you don't want to over-torque these fasteners at all because they're going into plastic standoffs that are just built into the bottom case, and if you strip them out, that's it, you're done-ski. You might be able to you might be able to thread in for a slightly larger fastener, because the plate does give you at least that much wiggle room in it, but it's not likely that the board would be the same again after that. So again, be very careful when you're taking apart a GMMK2 and putting it back together. And this applies to any integrated plate board like this, where the standoffs are not only built into the bottom case, but they're also plastic. So let's start putting some switches in. So again, these are Keebmonkey Iceberg Linears, and the links for these and everything that has been gone over in today's stream, including the news articles, if you weren't here for the first 30 minutes, are also in the stream's description. Got some really spicy stuff going on in the world of keyboards, and a lot of different group buys going on. There's a lot of excitement out of the Mode keyboard camp. Just really good stuff all around. Lots of in-stock GMK stuff. It's almost like people are getting pissed about having potentially several hundred of their dollars tied up for over a year on pretty colored plastic. And they're just waiting for in-stock options because they would rather pay more for something they know they're going to get sooner than pay less but run the risk of it just not being very good at all. Or just not being delayed into oblivion like round 1 of GMK Dracula was. Man, this is a really pretty switch. I actually have a set of stabilizers that matches these switches, like almost perfectly. They're Texie stabilizers. But I have them in a different board right now. I technically could have used them in this board, but I would have been 1 2U stabilizers short, and I didn't have enough more stabilizer housings to make a full matched set. I would basically just need to buy another set of Texie stabs, and while they're not terrible, I'm good. I'm good with just those sets for now. Yeah, actually, those stabilizers and these switches were destined for a different build that I was going to put together. But as it turns out, the keyboard I was going to use for that build was a pile of shit. So I ended up not doing it yet. But I am still going to build in it just as sort of an exercise in futility in trying to go too far down market. To find certain styles of keyboard, that there really, for certain things, there really is a base minimum standard you should be working with. Cool switches. The color is a very weird gummy fruit snacky blue. Yeah, exactly. I love the look on these switches. Very deep sounding, very muted acoustic profile on these, so I'm hoping between the tape mod we did and the keycaps we're going to be using with this, it should be a pretty reasonably deep sound for this board. And really, that's kind of how you want to build into... Oh, that didn't feel great. Oh, it just didn't feel great. It's fine. Everything is fine. It just felt horrible. Ugh. You ever, for anyone that's ever built a keyboard out there, you ever had that one socket you go to plug a switch into and it just feels all like crunchy and gritty, like you just irrevocably like damaged the shit out of your pin, and then you go to pull the switch just to see how much damage you've done, and it's fine. It's fine. It can be weird sometimes reading what the tactile feedback is that you're getting from a keyboard or a switch when you're building with it. Because especially with boards like these, and especially with a switch like this that comes in at only 20 cents per switch, you literally 20 cents per switch. You buy the switch at Keebmonkey. It's surprisingly well built for as inexpensive as it is, and it's on the Athleon switch
production lines. Now, Athleon as a company, this is the only exposure I currently have to them, and this is clearly their down market assembly lines. But the fact that they can produce something even this good a quality at only 20 cents a switch, that's nuts. It would only take you like $20 in switches to fully populate this board. And this is about as close to a full-size keyboard as you tend to see in the custom keyboard market. Keychron does have some hot swap custom full-size keyboards that not only have an F13 key, but if you don't want F13, you can turn that into a knob as well. And I definitely want to get one of those in to build on the channel as well. But you don't see a bunch of it. You just don't. And full-size keyboards, they still deserve love, and there are still a bunch of people out there that swear by full-size keyboards. Now, I'm basically just sitting here hoping that I actually have enough of these Iceberg Linears to complete this build. If not, then we're just going to insert some extra switches on the numpad cluster. But in looking at how many I have left, I just want to make sure we can populate the primary region of the keyboard first and foremost. Apart from a couple of sockets, these switches are going in pretty cleanly. No complaints. And the manufacturing tolerances on this plate, despite it being an integrated plate design, the tolerances are actually very good. Stabilizer fitment is really good, especially with these drop phantom stabs. Fitment of the screws and the countersunk openings is really nice. Countersunk openings too. Yes, this is otherwise a cheap design, but at least there's countersunk openings for the fasteners to sit flush against the plate. Maybe even a little recessed. You love to see it. Love to see it. Because normally tolerances with plates like these, they're either very loose or they're very tight. This seems to have gotten things just right. It could also partially be the switch that we're using. Different switches will vary your experience with plate fitment. Like trying to pull Novel Key's own cream switches from one of their aluminum plates on an NK87 aluminum edition is an utter nightmare. And I absolutely do not recommend ever getting anything with their current aluminum plates on it. It's not a great experience if you have to remove the switches. That said, if you get lucky and everything's just kind of fine, then you shouldn't have to worry about it. But, okay, it looks like we'll have enough to properly finish the board. Even a little cat hair in there, too. Dot says hi from the other room, basically. All right, yeah, we'll definitely have enough. It's always a sweaty moment when you pull out a batch of switches that you thought were going to be perfect for a keyboard build for a live stream, only to get to near the end of the build and realize that you're short like 5 or 10 switches or something like that. Also, can I just ask a question of some of you out there? Maybe there's someone that's more familiar with keyboard designs. Why in the actual shit are the hot swap sockets for those vertical caps not rotated to orient with the stabilizers? Why are these rotated in such a way that the stabilizer gets in the way of your switch puller every frickin' time you go to pull the switch there? End rant. But that is so infuriating. Why do that? It literally doesn't matter how that switch is oriented. It just needs to be there to work with the caps. If you rotate it to the side, you're not going to have any housing collision. I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong there, but something's got to give with orientation of the sockets for that. Because with those particular switches, once I insert these, I hope to never have to remove them for any reason ever again, because it is always a pain in the ass to remove them. Actually without fail, a pain in the ass to remove them.
Because I'm always worried that I'm going to damage the switch or the stabilizer in the process of trying to pull them, you know? We are just about done with the switches. Now, the caps we're using, again, linked in the chat description is just Tai Hao's Cubic keycap selection in general over at mechanicalkeyboards.com. Technically, this kit does not have the 1U0 key that we would really need to properly finish this board. 11 switches left over. Nice and tidy. Back in you go. All right, so that's looking really pretty. Now, it is worth noting that any light that shines through these switches is going to be tinted very blue. Like, very shockingly, like, ocean teal blue. So keep that in mind if you build with a switch like this. You're going to want, if there is lighting, to just be set to white so that the color of the top housing is what's coming through with the switch. I find that to be, personally speaking, the prettiest way to approach switches like these, but your mileage may vary, and if you have a switch with like a properly just colorless transparent top, then it won't matter anyway. So let's start applying some keycaps. Now, everything that I have in the bin over here is exactly what's needed for this board, so this is going to sound sick, y'all. This is actually going to sound sick. Yeah, I can basically just put things where they need to go as I pick them up because I pre-sorted the caps last night. I came prepared to go through this as quickly as possible. And I think, even though this does take up a bit more of my personal time, I would rather prepare for these streams like this to be able to just reach in, slap a cap on, and be done with it. They're all still perfect. Love, 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 love to see it. Man. I think this is actually going to be the best this board has sounded yet. And all of it with very inexpensive modifications done, if any. Actually, the only mod we have done to the keyboard proper so far is apply the 3M medical tape to the back. And again, unfortunately, these white caps do not come with Cubic white on black. They are only part of Cubic black on white. I happen to own both sets, though. So I decided I want to see that. And I'm continuing to build them like this as a message to Tai Hao to please, please, for the love of glob, include accent caps in your Cubic profile cap sets, at least white on black and black on white. For the black on white set, include white on black for the spacebar, escape, and both enter keys. That's all you need to supply to get the perfect amount of contrast. Same thing for white on black. Include the escape, enter, both enters rather, and the spacebar from black on white. And it's an amazing, like already, that just looks sick. We have put a handful of the caps on, and that already looks so sick. Telling you, hamstringing themselves. Also worth noting, Cubic Profile, since we haven't done a proper look at it just yet, if it looks very familiar to you, it's an iteration on OEM Profile that rather than having more... Let me see. I have an OEM cap in here. Perfect. Same row, too. We'll take a quick close-up look here. So, OEM Profile, Cubic Profile. The heights are essentially the same. Cubic is maybe ever so slightly taller by like a fraction of a millimeter, but functionally the same height. They also have the same spherical, or I'm sorry, cylindrical top to them. See how it looks like someone dipped a cylinder down on the top rather than dropping a sphere down on it? So they both have that going for them. But when you look at them top down, that's where the differences become apparent. Cubic has a much more cube-like edge along the outer edges of the keycap than something like this OEM cap does. And what that has the effect of doing is actually creating an ever so slightly broader surface area for you to type on, similar to something like a flat profile keycap like PG or XDA, but you get the sculpting of something that's more comfy and familiar, like OEM profile. So Cubic as a profile is really interesting in that way. It's also interesting that when I first showed these Cubic caps to BPS Customs, he sat there, typed on them for a few seconds, and said, "These are Cherry." And I was like, "No, they're Cubic." He's like, "You're full of shit. They look exactly like Cherry profile." They are definitely not Cherry profile, but it's because they just kind of look very similar to Cherry because of the texture and the relation to the profile. But when you put it side by side with Cherry, the differences become much more apparent. And it's also more obvious that this set is significantly taller than Cherry profile. There may actually be some folks out there that wouldn't like this because it is exactly tall enough that on some keyboards, depending on how tall or extreme the typing angle is and front typing height, this cap set may not be the most comfortable thing to type on. All right, and we've got our plus key. Actually perfect still. Actually perfect still. That's another reason I like these phantom stabs. I've literally moved these over to 3 different keyboards since tuning them. There's only one stabilizer that I had to do the tiniest, minuscule amount of retuning on. These things are great, seriously. If you have a plate mount PCB keyboard and you're in need of good quality stabilizers that aren't gonna bust your wallet wide open, drop Phantom. Absolutely are the way to go. Very easy tuning experience as well. It took me very little effort to get these stabilizers tuned the first time. 5E. All right. L7. This actually is like just one of my favorite parts of a keyboard build is getting to the point where I'm putting the caps back on. Because then I get to see the whole thing coming together, and especially if with the stabilizers just perfectly tuned like they are, it's so satisfying. And even if I end up not using the board as a daily driver, it's still, I love this process and I love seeing the finished product. And this absolutely, I get the feeling, is going to stay assembled as is. I actually thought about putting a white arrow cluster down here from the black on white cap set, but I felt like that would have been a bit too much white. Maybe we'll play around with that in a second after we get the board fully assembled. Maybe we'll play around with that, just see what it looks like, because we've got the means to do it, but as a default, I felt like the white arrows alongside the white enter here, the white enter here, like too much white at the bottom of the keyboard and not enough along the top row. Of course, I could fix that with some of the white blanks for up here, but we'll see. We'll see. I don't want to oversaturate it with white. I want it to just be like a gentle accent pop, and having the Tai Hao cap there, I think, is covering all of our bases quite nicely. God, these look... Yeah, the matte finish on Cubic is absolutely the way to go. Tai Hao, I don't know what happened with that run of caps that you sent me and why they have that sheen to them, but that needs to not happen with Cubic. This matte finish just looks so much cleaner for these caps, and it feels nicer too. Like, it's chalky, but it doesn't have an abundance of texture. There's just enough texture there that it's going to be a little more resistant to shine than it otherwise would have been. It's still going to shine. Don't get that twisted. These are still ABS keycaps. They will shine like a bastard. But such is the fate of all... I dropped a cap. Such is the fate of all ABS keycaps on a long enough timeline. And honestly, I kind of feel like that's part of the charm of ABS caps. Because it tells a story, right? It tells a story of how you type. Okay, I don't know why I have this 1U control in here. This is actually one that I need to get rid of, I think. Yes, this control needs to go with the bad caps. I actually don't need it, so I may need to dig through the other caps after all to find some of the last stuff that I need. Menu, function. I could probably get away with a blank for right here. Probably get away with that. Figures I get to the end and my sleep-fueled organization mind mode still managed to botch it. But that's how we do here. Yep, just need one cap. One R4 cap. Let's see. Let's do a blank. Yeah, we'll do a blank there. All right, perfect. That is a built keyboard. Look at that. Look at this. You can't tell me that despite the fact this is black on white, a very basic looking color combination, you can't tell me that don't look sick. You can't tell me that don't look sick. That looks so good. I really love how this board came together. Really clean legends on these Tai Hao caps. Really sharp, cleanly defined. I really like these accent caps along the side over here. Like, I want to see these included with the main Cubic profile cap sets. Now, let's unplug our current board, plug in our guest speaker, and I want to configure some RGB things. I had to drop out for a few minutes, and you finish right as I get back. Nice, looks great. Thank you, much appreciated. Yeah, it does look really nice. I am extremely happy with how this turned out, and I get the feeling I'm gonna be really happy with how it sounds as well. Brightness to 100. Not matrix. We want normally on white. Save. Ooh. So on the side over here, we still have it set to like blue side profile lighting, but the lighting underneath is set to white. So now, because we've got a floating switch design, we can see the blue shining through the side of the keyboard. Let's see if it'll focus a little bit better from that distance. Yeah, that's looking really good. This is looking really good. Now we need to see what this sounds like. So let's open up a sticky note and do probably the jankiest typing test we'll have done on the channel in a very long time, because I have to use my lav mic to do it. Those of you that have not been here for a minute or haven't been following along on our Twitch live streams, by the way, if you aren't doing that already, you really should. My boom arm broke for my condenser mic, which is the good mic for typing tests. So I get to use this super janky desk-mounted flex arm thing to clip my lav mic to do just any kind of typing test. It's not going to be quite as clear as the condenser mic tests we've done in the past, so keep all of that in mind going forward for the rest of the stream, because there's going to be a few other things that we mess around with this keyboard. But just wanted to explain the situation. I'm almost to the point that I'm making some money again, and I can allocate funds towards getting a proper boom arm, but for a proper mic. But for right now, this is unfortunately what I have to work with. So I appreciate your patience while I scramble to get life, the universe, and everything in order. Set that right there. I also want to open up VIA and make sure that all of our... Oh, wait, I can't do VIA. I can do the key tester. That's what I want. Okay. Hi. So, that's going to be a little awkward, trying to test all of those keys. Interesting. That one's... Okay. Looking good so far. Those darn hotkeys again. I know. That's why I need a Stream Deck. You know, I used to be one of those people that like to argue that I can do the same thing that a Stream Deck does with a macro pad and build it myself, but I'm starting to realize more and more that's not actually the case. There are things that a Stream Deck can integrate with on your with OBS that are just more convenient to do through a Stream Deck, so you avoid doing random window switching like we just did there. Anyway, let us do a typing test. Again, this is not going to be the most precise typing test either. I apologize for how it sounds, but I am working within my means, which are currently very meager. Try and get this as close to 7 inches as I can, but no promises. Yeah, I'm actually setting it a little closer than 7 inches just to account for audio levels. And then I'm going to swing it back this way a little bit. And move the board a little bit closer to me, also get it a little bit better in camera view. Okay, so again, this is our rebuilt GMMK2 using drop Phantom plate mount stabilizers, Keebmonkey Iceberg Linears lubed with 205 grade 0, and Tai Hao Cubic profile keycaps in a blend of white on black and black on white. We have also done a 3M medical tape mod, single layer, to the back of the PCB. All of the other case foam is stock. start off with a mods test.
Okay, not bad. Not bad at all. That's sounding, it's sounding more consistent than it originally sounded when we first reviewed this keyboard. That single layer of 3M tape has really it's really tightened up the acoustics on this board. You're getting less of that sort of pingy reverb sound that you get from some integrated plate designs. Still feels very stiff. Nothing has changed in that arena. It's still very much a stiff integrated plate design, but with the Switch at least having the elongated two-stage spring, at least I believe it's two-stage. It is two-stage. It is at least elongated. This is a very comfy spring to type on. It's bouncy, it's sharp, it's responsive. Return stroke sound for some. Return stroke sound is a little sharp. I could see that being a little bit grating for some folks. You can probably tone out a lot of that by going with PBT keycaps on this board instead of using the double shot ABS caps that we've gone with here. But there was one thing about this board during that typing test, and especially during the mods test, that didn't sound that great to me. We'll go over it again. It's the space bar. So we'll mount this here again. Let's take another focused listen at the space bar. Notice how as I move from right to left, the sound of the spacebar is shifting ever so slightly. The sound is shifting as we move from left to right. Now, I'm going to pull the space bar, and I'm going to show you why we are getting that inconsistent noise with the space bar, and why it sounds maybe a little bit worse than it should. Let's go ahead and plug this keyboard back in so we have our hotkeys again. The hotkeys, they're on fire. Please be recognized. Keyboard? keyboard. Keyboard. So, remember we were talking before how having mounting points on the plate near the spacebar can prove to be a little problematic for the sound and feel of the spacebar. Well, look at what's going on near the spacebar of GMMK2. We have two fasteners right smack dab in the middle of spacebar territory. One of them is directly next to the switch. The other one is just adjacent to our other plate mount stabilizer. This matters because when you have those hard anchor points on a plate right here, you're changing how the plate is flexing, because even with a firm typing experience that's not meant to have tangible flex, the materials are still giving, and more so depending on how hard or heavy-handed a typist you are. When you have these anchor points here, you're making the board more rigid in very specific regions. So as you're going across the board and you're typing, designs like this will tend to have uneven sound across the board, requiring some additional modding to get things to sound more even. The 3M tape mod has fixed a lot of the problems we were having across the board proper in the original review. This is a much more even sounding typing experience, and it only cost us a couple of bucks worth of 3M tape and a few minutes of our time. However, to fix this problem is even cheaper still. All you have to do done. Just pull the fasteners. Just pull the fasteners. You don't need those fasteners for this case. There are so many anchor points throughout the plate on the GMMK2 that you don't need the fasteners immediately near the space bar. Between the rest of the fasteners clamping down on the integrated top plate and the bottom case, compressing everything together, and all the switches being socketed in, and on top of that, the fact that, as we saw earlier, the PCB at the bottom is already sort of like really pressed against the foam down there. This is fine. In fact, looking at the front side of the keyboard, the only thing that really changes is you get the slightest of gaps in the front face of the case, and it's not something you're really gonna notice ever. But let's take a listen to how it sounds now that we've pulled both of those fasteners. Okay, so this is the spacebar without the fasteners. Not perfect, but it's better. Yeah, so now that we have removed those fasteners, we've got a much more even sounding space bar. It's still not perfect, and the reason for that is there's still technically those standoffs present there. We would have to be able to remove the standoffs to completely cure the issue we're having there. I don't feel like permanently modifying this case. I don't think it's worth going that far. That said, let's see what happens when we put just this outside fastener back in. I want to see what happens with that, and then we'll see what happens with just the center fastener installed.
We'll see how that impacts things overall, and that'll be more telling as to which of these fasteners is really giving us the problem with spacebar sound. Okay, so let's try this again. All right. Now we only have the one fastener in on the right side of the spacebar. It's a little bit more pronounced on the right side again. Okay, so now we've seen that this fastener seems to be doing a lot of work in the wrong direction for what it is we're looking for. Now let's move this fastener over to this standoff. And again, I'm doing all of this experimentation for all of you now because I'm comfortable assembling and disassembling boards like this multiple times. Again, make sure you minimally disassemble this board because of the plastic standoffs in the case. But now we're going to take a listen to what just this fastener does installed with the outside one removed. Okay, and now let's remove that fastener again, leave them both out, and we'll take a listen to what it sounds like without either of them again. It just sounds better without both of them. Just sounds better without either of those fasteners in place. All that said, let me actually unplug this one. I want to get a bit of a classy look going on the desk for a second. Move this GMMK Pro out of the way for a second. Plug in our bare cables cable. Ooh, that cable really sets this look off. That sets the look off, folks. That's it right there. Right there. Bare cables YC8 cable with a GMMK2 Tai Hao Cubic black on white with some, or a white on black with some black on white accents. Keebmonkey Iceberg Linears, very smooth linear. Surprisingly good in this board. I actually wasn't expecting to like the Iceberg Linears in this board, but like I suspected, we finally found a winner for these switches. So, yeah, that's definitely this build done and dusted. I actually really like how this keyboard turned out. And I'm really happy to have this back together because now that we're going to be having a lot of really exciting keycap stuff coming up on the channel to tide us over until we can do proper sound test stuff again. I want to have as many of our boards assembled in-house as possible. So next time we do keyboard building streams, it may be another board that I've got lingering about here that could use some TLC. Yeah, Joe, it's such a clean look that we got on this thing. It's fantastic. I love how this board turned out. And really, when it comes to GMMK2, as like skirting as close as possible to like the lowest budget end of the market, GMMK2 is a very reasonable board to work with. Also pretty easy mod with just removing the screws.
And as far as like the visuals are concerned, like, here, I'll unplug the keyboard for a second just so y'all can see in this camera. This tiny, tiny, insignificant gap along the front here is the only thing you suffer. Like, you can see me pinching it in, it wants to connect a little bit more, but that is the only thing you suffer when you remove those fasteners. Like I said, the rest of this board is being held together tightly enough. You don't technically need those fasteners in place to be doing what you want to do with it. It'll be fine. But, yeah, the GMMK Pro, or GMMK2 rather, I keep wanting to say Pro, you can get a bare bones for this for 80 bucks. And that just gets you the keyboard with some generic plate mount stabilizers. You will want to probably remove them, but you can also choose to just lube them and save a couple of bucks. So let's look at price of this build in total. GMMK2 bare bones, 80 bucks. Switches for populating a board like this, you're looking around $25 when you account for shipping and stuff. The keycaps are $45 for enough kitting of cubic Tai Hao to cover this board. And currently, with the link that's in the stream's description, the Tai Hao Cubic black on white set that would fit this board is in stock. Again, it doesn't have the 1U0, but you can put a blank R4 cap there and it will still work fine. You'll know what key is there. So we're looking $45 plus 20 plus 80. So let's pull up a calculator to make sure we're getting all of this right. Okay, so 80 plus 25 plus 45, $150. Plus, we'll say like $8 for the medical tape. Let's go with 20 for the phantom stabilizers. We'll go another like 25 for a thing of 205 grade 0 and a brush. All in from the start. Oh, we're gonna need a switch opener as well. To get a decent one, you're probably gonna want to add on like 18 bucks. Having the screw out would drive my OCD crazy, though, if I'm being honest. I might or might not be able to leave it out. I totally understand that. It's like knowing that it's not there. It sort of bothers me, but I mean, if we're being honest, like the way I swap back and forth through my keyboard so much, I've done so many freaky things to some of my boards here. I just sort of run with it. Like if y'all understood how much time I spent trying to get Karina to sound even as good as it does right now, your brains would explode. It's wild. So for me, this feels and sounds better enough that I don't personally miss the fasteners. In fact, I need to put them in with the rest of my my other stuff so I don't lose them for this board, just in case I get rid of it in the future. But assuming you were starting just from scratch, building a board like this, and you didn't have any of the other materials to build it, to do what we did here today, all in would run you just north of $220. For a keyboard this size, for what we've gotten here, for the level of customization that you get provided through Glorious Core, you can remap all of these switches the same as with QMK and VIA. You just have to use the Glorious Core interface instead. RGB lighting control that's fairly robust. It's per key. No wireless. That's a little bit of a bummer, but in general, all in for a board that sounds this good and that looks this good for around 220. Not terrible. Obviously, if you wanted to go proper full-size keyboard, there are some other less expensive options out there you can work with. And really, GMMK2's stronger value proposition is when you're talking about the fully built keyboard, because when you do fully built for GMMK2, whether it's compact or full size, it's 120 bucks all in for a full built keyboard that also comes with their factory lubed Fox linear switches, which I have a big old batch of here that I plan on using in a build in some point in the future. But you get a really solid factory lubed switch, and you get some of their shine through keycaps. It's only $40 over the original price of the bare bones, and you're out the door and ready to go. It maybe isn't as refined as the experience we have on the desk here today, but it will get you out the door. What we have here is basically the most premium version of GMMK2 that I would recommend most of my audience build. The fact is, this is still very much a sort of low budget entry tier custom mechanical keyboard, but you can still do some really cool stuff with it and get a really solid build out of it like this. Just maybe manage your spending with it and pay attention to things like the north-facing sockets. Remember, if you don't have a long pole switch, you will not be able to use cherry profile on this keyboard without interference along your R3 line of keycaps. If you do have a long pole switch, something like a DaVinci Oni linear or something like that, or maybe a Gazoo linear Thox switch would work as well, then you can use cherry profile caps on this board without interference problems, but that would be the only time you could do it. Also gonna want to be aware of the spacebar thing. Gonna want to definitely do some kind of tape mod, whether you use masking tape or 3M medical tape, depending on the direction you want to go. We went more balanced with the medical tape, really like what that did acoustically, and yeah, this board is this board is solid now. So yeah, that wraps up our build and our Sunday morning chill stream. I know all the rest of you have got stuff to do, errands to run, places to be, or you just want to get on to the rest of your relaxing, get some gaming in or something like that, or go out and just touch some grass, something like that. Who knows? So it's going to wrap it up for now. Thank you so much to everyone for tuning in to today's live stream and rebuild of the GMMK2. I'm really happy with how this board turned out, and I'm really excited for you all to see more of this board in some future content on the channel. And now I definitely need to have a place to display this on my keyboard wall. Damn, I already need more pegboards. So quick note before we head out, though. We are not going to be streaming next Sunday, and we are not going to be streaming at all this week. This is Thanksgiving week. I know a bunch of y'all are going to be traveling or have already traveled, spending time with friends, family, loved ones. We're going to be taking a breather here as well. I also have some behind the scenes and back end stuff to do for the channel, so I'm going to take this opportunity to be productive there while I also get in some much needed R&R. This past week was very stressful for us. So anyway, everyone, take care of you, take care of one another, and we will see you all next time. Happy Thanksgiving, happy whatever holidays you happen to celebrate, and if not, then have a good rest of your week, and we will see you next time on the week we come back. There will be an announcement of the times we're going to be streaming, because for about 2 weeks it's going to be a little weird. Got a job lined up. Gonna have some funky hours for us, but we'll get through it. The Sunday morning stream shouldn't change any, though. Anyway, take care, and we will see you all next time.